Welcome back to NewsOne Now. As the global effort to address climate change hangs in the balance, there's a new report out showing that some of the best known governmental organizations don't have many people of color in leadership. There are worldwide concerns over what President Trump is going to do about the future of the Paris Climate Accord after this past weekend's G7 summit. Mr. Trump says he will decide this week whether the United States will pull out of this agreement. That has been signed by more than 190 countries. Earlier this month, thousands turned out at climate change marches in Washington, D.C. and around the world. But new data from Green 2.0 finds that many non-governmental organizations that advocate for climate change don't have all that many people of color in leadership positions. Among all NGOs, according to Green 2.0's transparency card, 27% of full-time staffers are people of color, while 73% are white. 14% of their senior staff are people of color, while 86% are white. The board members are 22% people of color versus 78% white. At some of the nation's best-known NGOs, such as the National Wildlife Federation, 16% of the full-time staff are people of color. At the National Audubon Society, it's 18%. At the Sierra Club, 26% of their full-time staff are people of color. This, as advocates point out, that communities of color and low-income people are more at risk from pollution and climate change than others. Green 2.0 also released a study, Beyond Diversity, a roadmap to building an inclusive organization. The author, Dr. Maya Beasley of the University of Connecticut, joins us now. So, Doctor, what do you think is going on in these organizations where it seems like even though people of color are disproportionately impacted by environmental racism, they are next to invisible in terms of representation, particularly in leadership?
Right. I think that there's a couple of things that are going on. So one seems to be that the leadership that's in place oftentimes don't think that they can find qualified candidates of color, that they just don't exist. Which is
ridiculous.
Ridiculous, yes. Another problem that we have is that while they can see some of the benefits that diversity has for organizations, a lot of them seem to miss the fundamental importance of diversity to the bottom line for their organization. So they may understand that it can help build their constituency, but not understanding that diversity can help increase creativity and problem solving within organizations, that it makes organizations generally more responsible, that it leads to a greater meritocracy within the organization, that there can be improved productivity, things like that, if you're missing that, if you don't see it as fundamental to the mission of your organization and the work of your organization, then it's not going to be prioritized as much.
And I find this issue particularly engaging to me because I work a lot in diversity, equity, inclusion space, and I hear that excuse that you mention a lot. We can't find them, and I also find it a very thinly veiled excuse to say we don't know the benefits, because there's literally decades of research that show the benefits. Yes. So when you have organizations like these that are thought of as very progressive organizations that still show the same level of institutional racism that we like to say only exists in right-leaning organizations, what does that really tell us about the pervasiveness of institutionalized racism in society?
Well, I think it tells us just that it is, in fact, quite pervasive. I mean, the Green movement is, considered a progressive movement, but we are really lacking racial diversity. So there is increased gender diversity, which is, a wonderful thing, but we're still missing it for people of color, and I think it tells us that it isn't a top priority at this point.
I think part of the concern has got to be a pathway for minorities. They need to understand that this isn't an opportunity for them to come into a new opportunity, a new industry, one that is going to be here for years and decades in advance. And so they need to also reach out to the minority community. I think the second thing is when the minority community's voice isn't heard there, it leaves a huge void. The statistics show that minorities are affected by climate more so than any other community, and by not having them at the table leaves that voice out in this conversation, which it erodes our communities even more as we go forward. And when you don't have our voice at the table, it really is a problem, not just at the table, but leading the conversations on an ongoing basis. And I think it definitely provides an opportunity for us to be involved.
Right, and as you know, I'm sure, I mean, the country's becoming a racial plurality. So these organizations are facing different constituencies. They're going to face a different donor base. They're going to face different policymakers that they rely on. So it really behooves them to diversify. But it's a matter of not just getting them to understand what's in it for them, but helping them understand where the starting point is. And I think that, you know, your point is an excellent one, that we want to make sure that young people understand that there's a pipeline, but we also want to make sure that we make these leaders recognize that there is in fact a pipeline, and there are already young people out there that are qualified for these positions that need to be pulled in much earlier rather than later.
Yes. I just want to highlight your point. I'm glad you said it, Avis, as far as sometimes we give a pass to progressive and left-wing organizations on this issue. And, you know, this is something that's a culture in Washington. You have Spencer Overton on the show sometimes and Joint Center of Politics to talk about the fact that black Republicans or Republicans on Capitol Hill have hired more senior staff than Democrats, even though blacks only make up 8% of the Republican Party, whereas they're 90% blacks vote Democrat, but they could not find qualified enough people on Capitol Hill. So this is an issue, like you said, and I'm glad it's being brought attention to it, and that is not isolated to just one political side. It's in America itself, and it's on both sides, for real.
And one quick question, you mentioned about gender diversity. In my research on gender diversity itself isn't very diverse. It ends up being almost completely white women.
Yes.
As it relates to, is that the case with this as well?
That is absolutely the case, yes.
A lot of work to do.
A peaceful protest turned deadly. 37-year-old black man was shot and killed by Baton Rouge police. His hands are in the air, and you still get shot by the cops.
Oh my God, please don't tell me he's dead.
We're not gonna let hate define us.
Race is a big part of this.
If truly all lives matter, then all lives need to matter equally. What we require is action. What we require is accountability. We understand that black lives do matter, and we will keep focused on this issue.
NewsOne Now, every weekday morning at 7 on TV1.